Part 1. The fluorescent lights of my childhood home seemed to magnify every dust mote dancing in the air, every faded patch of wallpaper, every subtle crack in the carefully maintained facade of familial harmony. They also seemed to amplify the simmering tension in the room, the barely concealed resentment that had been building for years, reaching a crescendo with each forced smile and strained conversation. This was a holiday tradition, but not a happy one. The scene was played out with the same script every year. The words hung in the air, thick and bitter, like the cheap, diner-style coffee they always served at these forced family gatherings, coffee that smelled faintly of burned sugar and stale regret. They were delivered with a practiced cadence, a familiar sting that I had come to expect, but never quite managed to inoculate myself against. "You take and take, you never gave us anything, Mia." It was Aunt Carol, of course, the undisputed queen of passive-aggressive digs, the self-appointed keeper of the family flame, her voice a rusty hinge swinging open on years of accumulated grievances. Her tone was sharp and nasal, a grating sound that always seemed to set my teeth on edge. The us was understood, an unspoken collective that encompassed my parents, my extended family, the whole judgmental, small-town chorus that had always seemed to view me as some kind of black sheep, a wayward lamb who had strayed from the fold. This was the role I was always meant to play, and I played it well. I'd flown back for Thanksgiving, a ritual I endured more for the sake of my aging grandmother, Nana Rose, than any genuine desire to connect with these people. I had done my duty, fulfilling my familial obligations, sacrificing my time and my sanity for the sake of tradition. I paid the fare, came to the party, and now I was a person to complain about. I'd brought a gourmet pecan pie purchased from a trendy bakery in the city, made with organic pecans, local honey, and a hint of sea salt, a subtle dig perhaps, but one they were unlikely to appreciate. I'd offered to help with the dishes, enduring the inevitable comments about how I probably didn't know how to use a dishwasher, and even complimented my cousin Tiffany on her suspiciously enlarged lips. A blatant act of flattery that felt as hollow as the compliments she constantly fished for. She was always so insecure, but what could I do? It's all she has to offer. But nothing was ever enough. No matter how hard I tried, no matter how many concessions I made, no matter how much I bent over backwards to appease them, I was always found wanting, always judged inadequate, always reminded that I didn't quite measure up to their expectations. I'd moved to the city years ago, chasing a career, a life, that didn't involve marrying the high school quarterback, settling down in a cookie-cutter house in the suburbs, and popping out babies before I turned 25. I'd built a successful career as a graphic designer, carving out a niche for myself in a competitive industry, earning a decent living and enjoying a level of independence that they couldn't even begin to comprehend. I was finally the woman I was always supposed to be. But to them, I was still just Mia, who moved away. Still just Mia, who thinks she's too good for us. It was a label I couldn't shake, a judgment that clung to me like a persistent shadow. It was always what people had to say. The comment about taking and not giving was the final straw, the tipping point, the spark that ignited the long smoldering resentment that had been simmering within me for years. It was a culmination of all the subtle digs, the unspoken criticisms, the constant reminders that I was different, that I didn't belong. Years of suppressed anger and frustration finally boiled over, erupting in a sudden, decisive act of rebellion. It was my time to go wild. I simply smiled, a tight, brittle expression that probably looked more like a grimace, the muscles in my face straining to maintain a semblance of composure. "You're right, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice dangerously calm, my words dripping with a sarcasm that I knew she wouldn't appreciate. "You're absolutely right." I turned to walk out. Part 2. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze, a blur of strained conversation, forced smiles, and the lingering scent of turkey and cranberry sauce. It felt like a performance, a carefully choreographed dance of familial obligation, where everyone knew their roles and played them with practiced precision, even though their hearts weren't truly in it. It was a movie that played every year, and I hated it. I dutifully helped Grandma Rose, my Nana, with her mashed potatoes, carefully spooning the fluffy, buttery concoction onto her plate, while enduring a lecture from my Uncle Frank, the self-proclaimed expert on everything, about the perils of city living. the dangers of crime, the high cost of housing, and the moral decay of modern society. He always had to be right about everything, but I never let it bother me. It was all he was. He just wanted to be a person that made sense. I kept my opinions to myself, knowing that any attempt to engage him in a rational discussion would be futile. I even managed to dodge Tiffany's increasingly desperate attempts to sell me some kind of pyramid scheme involving essential oils, a multi-level marketing scam that she was convinced would make her a millionaire. She kept going on about how it was all natural and so good for you. The desperation in her voice was almost comical, but I resisted the urge to laugh, knowing that it would only fuel her resentment. Tiffany was not something I could control. But beneath the surface, beneath the forced pleasantries and the carefully constructed facade of familial harmony, something was brewing within me, a potent concoction of anger, frustration, and a growing sense of rebellion. An idea, a plan, a seed of defiance taking root in the fertile ground of my long-suppressed anger. It was starting to be. Aunt Carol's words echoed in my head, replaying on a loop, fueling my resolve. You take and take, you never gave us anything. The accusation was unfair, untrue, and deeply hurtful. I had given them my time, my attention, my effort, my love, but none of it seemed to matter. I needed to take it to the limit. Fine, I thought, my jaw clenching, my fists tightening. You want something given? I'll give you something, all right. I needed to strike back, to retaliate, to prove to them that I wasn't the pushover they thought I was. But I needed to be smart, strategic, calculating. I couldn't just lash out in anger. That would only confirm their prejudices. I had to be better. I needed it to be big, to be impactful, to leave a lasting impression. I didn't want to inflict physical harm or cause any lasting damage, but I wanted to shake them, to rattle them, to force them to see me in a new light. I didn't want to be me any longer, and it was all coming together. This was all it took. I needed to be someone, and what I was not was going to be on my side. I just needed to make it all fit. After dinner, while everyone was clustered around the television, mesmerized by some inane football game, their brains numbed by alcohol and tryptophan, I saw my opportunity. I needed to get away. I slipped away unnoticed, feigning a sudden migraine, clutching my head dramatically and groaning theatrically. Just need to lie down for a bit, I mumbled, my voice barely audible above the roar of the crowd and the drone of the commentators. My parents, bless their hearts, looked genuinely concerned, their faces etched with worry. Oh honey, are you all right? Mom fretted, reaching out to touch my forehead. It was sweet, but I couldn't allow myself to get too attached. They would always side with the rest of the family. Aunt Carol just snorted, rolling her eyes and muttering something under her breath about how I was always so dramatic. Her lack of concern only fueled my resolve, confirming my belief that she was the root of all my problems. It didn't matter though, she didn't matter. Upstairs, in the guest room I always occupied, a small cramped space that smelled faintly of mothballs and old linens, I locked the door behind me and started to plan, my mind racing, my adrenaline pumping, my heart pounding in my chest. It was here that I was going to get her back. I needed to prove to people that I was worth something. Part 3. Upstairs, in the starkly lit guest room that felt more like a sparsely furnished holding cell than a welcoming space, I took a deep breath, trying to quell the chaotic thoughts swirling through my mind. The fluorescent overhead light hummed with an irritating buzz, a constant reminder of the artificiality of this place, of this entire charade. It wasn't long before I knew what I needed to do. I started to plan in earnest, pacing back and forth across the threadbare rug, my mind working furiously, weighing my options, considering the potential consequences of my actions. What could I take that would truly sting? What was the most valuable thing they possessed? Not in terms of monetary worth, but in terms of emotional significance, in terms of their deeply held beliefs and values. What could really get under their skin? Money? They didn't have much. My family wasn't rich, or even particularly well off. They lived simple, frugal lives, working hard to make ends meet, but they weren't driven by material possessions. They didn't care about money, and therefore it wouldn't hurt them. Possessions? Nothing they owned held any real value. either sentimental or monetary. The house was filled with dusty antiques, faded photographs, and worn-out furniture, relics of a bygone era, reminders of a past they clung to with a desperate tenacity. They were not worth anything. I had to think bigger, more strategically. I needed to target something more fundamental, something more deeply ingrained in their collective identity. I needed to strike at the heart of their family dynamic, to expose the cracks beneath the carefully constructed facade of unity. I needed a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, and something precious, something irreplaceable, something that would leave a void in their lives that could never be filled, something that would haunt them for years to come. I had to make sure that the moment I went there, it was for a reason. Then it hit me, the realization dawning with the force of a revelation. The one thing they all valued above all else. The one thing that held this family together. The glue that bound them to this town, to each other, to their shared history. The only thing. It was the legacy. And something I knew to be a lie. A carefully constructed narrative of virtue and selflessness. A romanticized version of their family history that ignored the uncomfortable truths and the deep-seated resentments that simmered beneath the surface. It was all fake. I had to take it all away. What had they actually achieved? What had they actually done? Nothing. What had they ever done? It was Nana Rose, my grandmother, the matriarch of the family, the woman who had always been the voice of reason, the source of unconditional love, the moral compass that guided them through life. Nana Rose, and how she was the glue. What was going to happen next was going to change everything. And what I would take would be her. She's all that mattered. I was going to steal her. I was going to rescue her. I was going to free her from this suffocating environment, from these people who claimed to love her, but who treated her more like a burden than a blessing. I was going to prove what they truly felt about Nana Rose, by taking her away from them, by exposing their selfishness and their hypocrisy. I was going to show them that they didn't deserve her, that they didn't appreciate her, that they were taking her for granted. It was just too bad that that's where it was. I had her and I was ready to go. I waited until the house was quiet, until the only sounds were the rhythmic snores emanating from the various bedrooms, the heavy breathing a testament to their food-induced comas. The waiting was the hardest part. I needed to know that it was the right time. I needed everything to line up. Then I slipped out of my room, my movements silent and stealthy, like a shadow gliding through the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest, my adrenaline pumping, my mind focused on the task at hand. There was no going back now. This was my chance. I wouldn't allow myself to fail. This was a moment. I tiptoed down the stairs, past the darkened living room, where the television flickered with the ghostly image of the football game, past the sleeping forms of my parents and my cousins, oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold. I had to get out of there. I did what I could, and what was needed. The back door was right around the corner. This was it. My destination was clear, my purpose unwavering. It was time to take what was most important. This was my life, and I'm happy to do it. Part 4. The cool night air hit my face as I slipped out the back door, the darkness a welcome cloak of anonymity. A million stars twinkled above, a silent, indifferent audience to the drama unfolding below. The sky was like a comforting blanket. I needed it. It had been far too long, and now, things were starting to change. Nana Rose's house was only a few blocks away, a short, brisk walk that felt like a pilgrimage. It was a quaint little bungalow, a charming, if slightly dilapidated, structure that had been in the family for generations, a symbol of their heritage, a testament to their roots. It was what I needed to destroy. This town was small, and they only cared about tradition and heritage. It was a time capsule of faded floral wallpaper, antique furniture covered in plastic, and the lingering scent of lavender and mothballs, a musty aroma that evoked memories of childhood visits, of long summer days spent playing in the garden and listening to Nana Rose's stories. This was my escape route. It was what made me strong. I hated how she didn't use it. I felt a pang of guilt, a flicker of doubt, as I approached the house. Was I doing the right thing? Was I being selfish, impulsive, reckless? Was I about to inflict even more pain on my already fractured family? It didn't matter to me. I knew that the house needed some repairs. The roof was leaking. The paint was peeling. The foundation was cracking. The whole property had to be a tear down, a relic of a bygone era that was desperately in need of modernization. But my family, clinging to their traditions, their memories, their sense of identity, refused to let it go, clinging to the past. I'd always loved visiting her, escaping the judgment of my parents and the sneers of my cousins, finding refuge in her warm embrace and her unconditional acceptance. Nana Rose was the only one who truly saw me, who appreciated my intelligence and my ambition, who never tried to force me into the mold they had created, who never tried to stifle my individuality. I wasn't that kid anymore. The back door was unlocked, as it always was, a testament to Nana Rose's unwavering trust in her neighbors, a quaint, old-fashioned notion that both charmed and terrified me. In this day and age, with crime on the rise and social isolation becoming increasingly prevalent, it seemed almost naive to leave your door unlocked. It was so scary. It's what allowed me to do this. I slipped inside, my movements silent and practiced, my footsteps barely audible on the worn wooden floors. The house was dark and still. The only sound the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a rhythmic pulse that marked the passage of time, a constant reminder of the inevitable march towards oblivion. I could feel that I wasn't wanted. Now that all the planning was done, now that the decision had been made, now that the wheels were in motion, I felt a strange sense of calm, a quiet determination that pushed aside the doubts and the anxieties that had been plaguing me. This was it. This was happening. There was no going back now. I just had to stay strong. I could have called before this, but it was better to have done it at the door. People would try and tell me how to run my life, but only I could live it. I made my way to her bedroom, my heart pounding in my chest, my adrenaline surging, my senses heightened. Each step was a deliberate act of defiance, a silent rebellion against the expectations and the constraints that had defined my life for so long. I hesitated at the door, my hand hovering over the doorknob, a sudden wave of guilt washing over me, threatening to derail my carefully laid plans. What was I doing? Was I really about to go through with this? Was I really about to disrupt the peace and quiet of this small town, to shatter the illusion of familial harmony, to make an enemy of my own family? I steeled myself, pushing aside the doubts and the guilt, reminding myself of Aunt Carol's words, of the years of resentment and disapproval, of the countless times I had felt like an outsider, an outcast, an unwanted guest. You take and take, you never gave us anything. Those words were like a mantra, a catalyst, a justification for my actions. I'd had enough, I'd suffered enough, I'd given enough. Now it was my turn to take. This was a new game. I pushed open the door, my resolve firm, my purpose clear. What I was about to do, I could not be undone. This moment was forever. I had to keep going. This was the only way. Part 5. Nana Rose's bedroom was bathed in the soft glow of a bedside lamp, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls, transforming the familiar space into something otherworldly and ethereal. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and age, a comforting aroma that simultaneously soothed and saddened me. It was now or never. Nana Rose was asleep, her face etched with wrinkles that told a lifetime of stories, a roadmap of triumphs and tragedies, of laughter and tears. Her silver hair was pulled back in a loose bun, her breathing shallow and raspy, her chest rising and falling with a delicate rhythm that seemed almost fragile. She looked so frail, so vulnerable, so utterly dependent, lying there in her floral nightgown, her hands clasped together on her chest. I felt a pang of regret, a sharp stab of remorse, as I gazed at her sleeping form. What was I doing? Was I about to betray the one person who had always loved me unconditionally, the one person who had always believed in me, the one person who had always been there for me? Was I about to exploit her vulnerability, to use her as a pawn in my own personal vendetta? I couldn't turn back. It was what needed to be done. I had come so far. I had endured so much. I had sacrificed so much to get to this point. I couldn't allow myself to be swayed by sentimentality, by guilt, by fear. I had a purpose, a mission, a goal to achieve, and nothing was going to stand in my way. I took a deep breath, steeling my resolve, pushing aside the doubts and the anxieties that threatened to overwhelm me. This was for Nana Rose, I told myself. This was for her own good. This was the only way to save her from a life of quiet desperation, from a family that didn't truly appreciate her. I was doing the right thing. Nana, I whispered, gently shaking her shoulder, my voice barely audible above the ticking of the clock. Nana, wake up. We're leaving. Her eyes fluttered open, her gaze unfocused, her mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. She blinked a few times, trying to clear the fog of sleep, her brow furrowed with confusion. Mia? What's wrong, dear? She mumbled, her voice thick with sleep, her words slurred and indistinct. We're going on a trip, Nana, I said, forcing a smile, trying to project an air of calm and reassurance. A long trip. Just you and me. To a place where we can be ourselves, where we can be happy, where we can be free. I didn't elaborate, I didn't explain, I didn't give her a chance to question my motives or to express her concerns. I knew that if I gave her time to think, to analyze, to object, she would never agree to come with me. This had to be done quickly, decisively, before she had a chance to change her mind. I took her by the arm and made her walk. It was time to go. I helped her out of bed, her movement slow and unsteady, her frail body trembling with a mixture of sleepiness and confusion. I gathered her,